Welcome to my channel. Here we dive into fascinating stories from the rich and complex history of the USSR, the Russian Empire, and even earlier times. These days we hear a lot about mindful consumption, living in a way where we use fewer resources, avoid buying things we do not really need, and take better care of what we already have. But have you ever thought about how in the Soviet Union mindful consumption wasn't a trendy lifestyle choice, but just the way things were? Back then, with limited resources and constant shortages, people had to get creative. They reused, repaired, and repurposed almost everything. Serving mesh bag avoyska replaced plastic ones, glass bottles were used instead of plastic containers, and fixing clothes or appliances were just normal. Nobody thought twice about it. These habits were so common they didn't even feel like something special. In this video, we dive into how life in Soviet Union shaped the habits we'll now call mindful consumption. And we also take a look at what lessons from that time could still make sense in today's world. Back in the Soviet Union, recycling paper wasn't really a thing until the 1970s. Before that, there just wasn't much need for it. Paper consumption in the USSR was one of the lowest in Europe. But as book publishing grew and more products started coming in packaging, the need to recycle paper became obvious. That's when the Soviet pioneers, kids from the official YAS organization, started collecting newspapers, magazines, and cardboard with catchy slogan "Waste into Wealth." Recycling paper actually became worth it. For every 10 kilograms of paper you brought to a collection point, you could get coupons for rare books. The whole system was pretty organized. Specialized stores like Stimul managed the process, and trucks labeled recyclables would drive through neighborhoods picking up paper right from people's homes. It saved folks the hassle of dragging heavy bundles to a collection centers themselves. The system was a win-win. It worked for the people and the state. Big paper mills turned all that recycled materials into notebooks, albums, books, and more, and it saved thousands of hectares of forest from being cut down. They even told school kids that recycling 54 kilograms of newspapers could save one tree, a great motivator. By the late 70s, around 20% of all cardboard produced in the USSR was made from recycled materials. In big cities, up to 75,000 tons of paper were collected every year. It was a big step towards saving resources and cutting waste. In the USSR, glass bottles were made to a single standard, which made recycling much simpler. There was no need to sort them by shape or size. You could tell milk from kefir just by the color of the foil cap: plain foil for milk, green stripes for kefir, and gold for Ryazhenka. The price of drinks and other goods in glass containers included a deposit for the bottle. For example, soda cost 30 kopecks, and 20 of those were for the bottle itself. This system encouraged people to return their empty bottles instead of throwing them away. Everyone participated, even those who had enough money. Bottles were often kept on balconies, in garages, or sheds until there were enough to take back in one go. The process was pretty strict. Bottles were checked for chips, cracks, and dirt. Damaged or dirty ones? No chance, they wouldn't take them. Bottle collection points were everywhere. There were usually small plain buildings kind of like storage sheds where crates of empty bottles were stored until transport. Grocery stores also accepted bottles, often as a part of an exchange. You could bring your empty bottle, pay only for the product itself, and receive a full one without the added cost of the bottle. You could return as many bottles as you wanted, but sometimes collection points ran out of the crates to store them. When that happened, they would put up a sign saying "No crates available." Of course, if you didn't want to wait, you could always strike a deal with the attendant. For 5 kopecks less than the usual price, they might still take your bottles. It worked out for both sides. The owner didn't have to wait for crates to arrive, and the attendant got to pocket the difference as an extra income. Some made decent money that way. For the state, glass bottle recycling system made perfect sense. Washing and reusing bottles was much cheaper than producing new ones, and for citizens it was a small but welcome way to make a little extra cash. At the same time, it encouraged a culture of reusing and recycling, even if people didn't really think of it as saving the planet back then. In the Soviet Union, collecting scrap metal played a crucial role in sustaining the country's economy and industry. After the destruction of World War II, which began for the USSR in 1941, metal was needed for everything: rebuilding cities and infrastructure, producing agricultural machinery, industrial equipment, and military technology. Recycling scrap metal helped reduce the need for mining raw ore, which was costly to transport and process. Instead, scrap metal was sent to steel plants, melted down and used to produce steel, cast iron and various alloys. Everyone was involved in metal collection. School children play a key role, actively participating through organizations like Pioneers and Komsomol. School held competitions to see who could collect the most scrap metal, with winners received certificates, badges, or even trips to Pioneers camps. Young people were taught to see this as their patriotic duty and a contribution to a greater good. Factory workers organized the collection of industrial waste, while regular citizens donated items they no longer needed, everything from old appliances to rusty nails and pipes. The importance of scrap metal collection was promoted through propaganda, including cartoons. For example, the 1960 film Iron Friends tells an engaging story about metal objects that go through adventures, are repurposed and take on new useful forms. In one episode of Gena the Crocodile and Cheburashka, the characters organized a metal collection drive to help the pioneers. These stories instilled in children the idea that even small contributions could make a big difference for the country. However, by the mid-80s, things started to change with the onset of perestroika. Economic reforms shifted priorities, and ideological campaigns like scrap metal collection began to lose significance. Scrap yards no longer asked about the origins of the metal, opening the door to abuse. People started to see collecting metal as an easy way to make money. Some went as far as cutting down power cables, dismantling transformer stations, or even stealing railroad tracks. Slogans like "More metal means a stronger motherland" lost their meaning amidst growing poverty and scramble for a personal gain. In the Soviet Union, single-use packaging was rare, and plastic bags appeared much later. The first plastic bags started to circulate in the 70s, and they were considered a luxury. Because of this, people treated them with care. They would wash, dry, and reuse them multiple times. Some families even kept plastic bags for years. Most products were sold without packaging or in reusable containers. For example, at markets or stores, shoppers often brought their own glass jars for milk, sour cream, or kvass. Sugar and grains were usually scooped into paper bags. Parchment paper was commonly used for wrapping items like cheese, sausage, or butter. Old newspapers also served as makeshift wrapping for smaller items like sunflower seeds, sugar, or candies. One of the most iconic symbols of Soviet life was the avozka, a lightweight mesh bag made from durable string. The avozka was incredibly practical. You could fold it up and tuck into your pocket, and when unfolded, it could hold several kilograms of groceries. In addition to avozkas, people used woven baskets, sturdy fabric shopping bags, and even handmade cloth pouches for storing bread and grains. These homemade alternatives were simple but effective, reducing the need for disposable packaging long before it became a global trend. In the Soviet Union, repairing and sewing clothes was an important part of everyday life. People preferred to fix what they had rather than throw it away. Broken zippers, torn seams, or worn elbows were never reasons to discard clothing. Instead, people mended holes, patched up damage, and even replaced worn-out parts. For example, jacket elbows were often reinforced with patches made of leather or other sturdy fabrics. When it came to shoes, repair was just as common. Every town, even the smallest village, had cobbler workshops where anything could be fixed, from replacing soles to repairing zippers on boots. Buying new shoes was rarely the first option if the old ones could be salvaged. Some skilled individuals even repaired their footwear at home. A sewing machine was almost a household necessity in Soviet families. Popular models like Podolsk or Zinger were passed down from generation to generation. These machines were used to sew brand new clothes, as well as to repair old ones. Many women made their own dresses, skirts, shorts, or even coats. Patterns from magazines like Rabotnitsa Krestyanka were widely used as guides. For those who couldn't sew themselves, tailoring shops were an accessible option in almost every town. These shops could create custom clothing or alter store-bought garments, which were often mass-produced and didn't always fit perfectly. Tailoring ensured a better fit and extended the life of clothing, helping families save money and resources. Many Soviet families had dachas or gardens. A dacha was a small plot of land outside the city that families used for relaxation, growing vegetables and fruits, or even as a summer residence. These dachas often featured simple wooden cottages, suitable only for warm weather. They were typically located in dachas communities just outside the urban areas. A garden, on the other hand, was a plot of land for growing produce, usually near the home or at the dacha. Even urban residents often had small garden plots allocated by the state, allowing them to grow their own food and reduce dependence on store-bought goods. The guiding principle at the dacha was nothing goes to waste. Old items not only made life easier but also saved money. People found creative and practical uses for things that might otherwise have been thrown away. For example, old window frames were repurposed to build greenhouses or cold frames. Bus stops were used as water reservoirs, car tires became flower beds or swings for children. Worn-out clothes were turned into poloviki, small woven rugs made from strips of fabric. In short, anything that still had even the slightest use was given a second life at the dacha. In the Soviet Union, public transportation was the primary way for most people to get around. Private cars were a rarity. In the 70s, there were only about 30 cars per 1,000 people. One of the first buses in the USSR was the AMA F-15, built in 1926 at a Moscow factory. It was small, seating just 14 passengers and moving at a slow pace, but it was a lifesaver for office workers, making commutes much easier. By the 1934, the first mass-produced buses, the ZIS-8, appeared in cities. These buses could carry 31 passengers and reach speeds of up to 60 km per hour, perfect for urban transportation. During World War II, most public transportation vehicles were sent to the front lines, and the remaining buses were converted to run on gas due to fuel shortages. After the war, the bus fleet was updated with models like ZIS-154 and ZIS-165. In 1968, the iconic Rias 677 entered production. By the 70s, Hungary, roomy and comfortable Icarus buses started arriving in the USSR, adding a touch of modernity to public transport. Trolleybuses and trams were another staple of Soviet transportation. Both became widely used during the Soviet era. And of course, we can't forget the metro. It became a cornerstone of transportation in major cities like Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, and Minsk. Stations were adorned with marble, stained glass, and sculptures, showcasing the grandeur of Soviet architecture. Due to limited resources, the USSR focused heavily on developing public transportation rather than private vehicles. This strategy, particularly the emphasis on electric transport, had the added benefit of making cities cleaner, a goal still relevant today. As I mentioned earlier, many Soviet families had dachas or garden plots, and the harvest from these had to be preserved for the winter. This was done through various methods of preservation. Cucumbers were pickled, tomatoes salted, cabbage fermented, and fruits turned into jams and compotes. People also dried fruits, berries, and mushrooms to ensure nothing went to waste. The culture of saving extended to cooking as well. Sour milk was turned into cottage cheese, kefir, or used in baked dishes like casseroles. Stale bread was repurposed into breadcrumbs or croutons. Recipes were generally simple, and meals followed the season. Fresh vegetables and fruits in the summer and fall, while winter diets relied on potatoes, cabbage, carrots, and preserved goods. Exotic fruits or spices were an extreme rarity. From the 40s to the 60s, there was even a system for collecting food waste in cities where people didn't have the means to process it themselves. Posters encouraging citizens to donate food scraps for public benefit were common. By the 70s and 80s, however, the system of food waste collection began to lose relevance due to new technologies and economic reforms. Still, in rural areas and in dachas, people continued to use organic waste to make compost, which served as natural fertilizers for their gardens. The Soviet Union left us with a unique legacy of resourcefulness and careful use of resources. In times of scarcity and limited opportunities, people found creative and effective ways to reuse items, recycle waste, and extend the life of everyday things. What was once a necessity can now be seen as mindful consumption. Did your family have similar stories of resourcefulness? Share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more fascinating stories. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.